people of Judah were taken into exile. This is about 600 BC. Assyria had been the big empire that had been beaten by the Babylonians. Babylonians come in and they're taking people off into Babylon in exile. And they're, oops. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's what's going on. And particularly the priests and the leaders were taken into exile. And even Daniel, actually, we know about Daniel, and he links in with this. Now, just imagine, and sadly it's quite easy to imagine these days, what it would be like if your country is dominated by a big superpower, or if your country is at war. Sadly, there's all of that going on at the moment. But you are going to be thinking, what is happening? Where is this going? What's the future for me? In the case of Judah, add on to the fact that Abraham had been promised by God that his descendants were going to live in this land. And yet this land has been occupied, people have been taken off. The whole of their future, the whole of their life, the whole of their identity was at question. And where's God in this? It's all a big, big mess. So you as an individual, you're going to be worried, you're going to be uncertain, you're going to be thinking, where is this going? So that's the background. And so let's read Jeremiah 29, starting at verse 4. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. So we're talking long term here. Increase in numbers. Do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Then moving on to verse 10. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I've banished you, declares the Lord, and bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. So what we see from this is that God has got plans. He sees the future. He knows what's going to be happening, and he's going to work it out. Even if from our perspective, it looks a total mess and there are lots of loose ends and questions. And the great thing is that this truth applies to us too. He has plans for us. He has plans for me. He has plans for each one of you in this room. Yeah, so if I was one of those exiles, I would be uncertain. I would be worried. I'd be afraid. How long is this going to last? I'd be desperate to get back home to where, well, home. When you're away on holiday or something, or you're away doing something, it's always nice to get back home, isn't it? To sort of be where you belong. So they would want to be home. But God says something different. He says, guys, you're going to be here for 70 years. He has a plan. He tells them to settle down, to seek the blessing of the place, the prosperity of the place. 70 years is a long time. I'm not even 70, and I'm kind of thinking that's like, it's a whole of a life. But yet God works in long time periods. We are very impatient. If I want something to happen, and if it hasn't happened in about 3 or 4 days, I'm getting stressed, I'm getting upset. But God doesn't work in days. He works in years. He works in decades. Think of the children of Israel around in the desert. 40 years. And just before that, they had been in Egypt for 400 years. And you kind of think, why does God do that? And I think this is probably only part of the story, but part of the story is us and how slow we are. Because when God works, he usually wants to change us. And, we're usually slow. We're usually a bit stubborn. It takes a while. It perhaps takes a few tough times for God to really get through to us. So, this was going to be a tough one for them. So let's go back to the scripture, and verse 11, this is a verse I've gone back to for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. I found it really helpful when things have been tough. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And this sort of verse reminds me of say, Psalm 139, where it talks about God's knowledge of us, how intimately he knows us, how he knows our comings and our goings, how he knows all of what we're doing. To give a bit of sort of personal story to this, I used to live in Whitney, as we established earlier, and sadly, about 5 years ago, my first wife, Georgina, she died. And you can imagine that she was diagnosed with bowel cancer, so we knew sort of where things were at. And in the sort of lead up to her dying, and in her dying, it was, I suppose before that, the questions was, what's our future? What's our future together? And then as she died, what's my future? Those are tough questions. Those are at a time of sort of just really deeply upset and all the loose ends and that sort of thing. And yet this verse, which is a verse that we'd had as a sort of, backdrop to our life, if you like, that God had spoken, or this whole section that I'm talking about, it really gave me a strength to know that whatever the loose ends, whatever the questions, whatever the hurts and upsets and so on, somehow in all of that, God has got a plan. And the great thing is you don't always need to understand it. But it's a case of just seeking to trust God, to look to him, and knowing that he will work that out. So I believe that's true for all of us. Whatever uncertainties, whatever difficulties, whatever problems, whatever situations that you think, what's this about? Where's this going? God's got plans. Where there's hopelessness, God has got hope. Other examples of that can include things like poverty. Poverty, typically we think of that as an issue to do with money. But it's so often more than that. Yes, it's to do with money and not enough money, but it's to do with health issues often, education, loneliness, all sorts of things sort of piling in and just making life empty and hopeless. Can think also hopelessness can be depression and anxiety. Whatever the issues, whatever the background to that, you kind of feel trapped, you feel stuck. You don't know where there's a way out. You don't know how life can be different. Or perhaps, you're at a point in life where you don't know where your future is, where things are going from here. Perhaps you feel, I'm not going to achieve much. I'm a nobody. What's my life about? Where's it going? All sorts of things. These are big issues that anyone, all of us, can face. These are very much sort of 21st century issues, but also there are the issues of hopelessness and of poverty for millions and millions of other people across the world. So this all might seem a bit heavy in a way, but there is good news in it. And that's what I believe God is saying to us. He said it to the people of Judah. He's saying it to us today. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So that was verse 11 we read then. Let's move on to verses 12 and 13. We've kind of seen what God wants to do, and this is what we should do. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me. I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I don't know if you've noticed, but often the scriptures repeat themselves. If you read a psalm, it will say something, and then it will use different language to say pretty much the same thing. And that's kind of like, because it's an important thing for us to hear and to learn. And this repeats itself. It says the same thing effectively 4 times. So it's like seriously important. So God calls us, or says, call, come, pray, and seek. To me, call suggests we are trying to get God's attention. It perhaps suggests being loud and being persistent. We're really wanting to, God, try and attract his attention. So we call. We don't stay quiet. In the situation that we're struggling with, whatever it is, we call. Come is a word of movement. Movement towards God. It was great at the beginning. You just sort of said something about coming into God's presence. We know that as Christians we can do that God is accessible, that he invites us in. And come is something, if we come to him, we can approach him and just ask him, seek him. He wants, what does he want to share with us? So we choose to come, to make that sort of movement. We want to be with him. We want to see his face. We want to get his answer. So we call, we come. Pray is about talking to God, laying something before him. There's a certain sort of humility about that, where we've got a situation, we're sort of giving it to God, talking to him, asking. And that's a two-way thing. So we're wanting to hear God's take on it, God's view. What's he saying? We want to talk something through with God, so we pray. And then seek is about looking. We are looking for God in this situation. We're searching for his thoughts, for what he's saying. And if you're looking for, you lose something and you're looking for it and you can't find it, well, you carry on searching. If it's that important, you keep searching. Put all of these words together, and they are action words. They're doing words, where we're actively seeking, looking for God. God also says, with all our heart. So that needs a commitment. That needs us to be doing it and going for it. Needs a humility. And then the great thing is that God promises that he will listen to us. That we will find him. And I think that's just amazing that me as an individual, you as individual people, we can meet, we can find God. So I don't know where you guys are in life, what sort of situations there are for you, but if there are things that are troubling you, if there are things that are struggling, then do bring them to the Lord. Do come. Do call. Do seek. Do pray. And maybe that's something that you want to do with someone else. So, always take the opportunity to get someone else alongside you. Maybe that's something as we focus on the communion later on, that we can be sort of calling and coming and praying and seeking God as we do that. In fact, what I'd like us to do now is just take a moment or two of silence, just to quietly ourselves just talk to the Lord, just thank him. If there's something that's you're struggling with or that you know somebody else is struggling with, just bring that to the Lord. Leave that with him. Okay. So we've talked about God having a hope and a future for us, and perhaps we can now think about how we can help other people to have something of that hope and that future that Jesus offers. That's something, as I said at the beginning, that compassion does, is it gives a hope and a future to people. And typically what will happen is you'll sponsor a young child. But actually what happens is you're not just sponsoring this little young child, but your support touches the family. It touches the community. Whenever I meet a compassion graduate, someone who's sort of been through being sponsored, being supported, so often you just realize the ripple effect. I think ripple is not the right word. It's waves almost. The scale of what is so often done and happens through this little 5-year-old child that someone was sponsoring, and then what they do with their lives. I first got involved or first started sponsoring a child through Compassion when I went to an event, and there was a lady there, African lady, mid to late 20s, they interviewed. She was a graduate from Compassion. And she was a trained medical doctor. And it just struck me that there was this little girl that somebody, could have been me, could be you, whoever, had sponsored, had committed themselves to, had prayed for, had written to, had supported. This little 5-year-old girl, and there she was on the stage, a medical doctor, and how many thousands, and it would be thousands of lives, as a doctor, she was touching, she was changing. It struck me that this is such a good thing that you're touching a life, you're changing the world of that child, but actually you're changing the world of so many more people. So that's how I got involved, and so that led me to sponsor Susanna, who's from Tanzania. They work in 29 different countries. So that's how I started, and ever since then I've been just kind of thinking, what can I do more? And so I do some volunteer work. I come out and speak at churches like this. I go to events, so big church or concerts or something that if Compassion have got a stand. And I also do volunteer work for the office, so sort of admin stuff, just to try and take a bit of the pressure off the staff there. So that's what I do. Now, many of you here sponsor children already, and that is absolutely great, and I really appreciate that. And the Compassion team are really thankful to you for that. So they've prepared some slides as a sort of thank you, showing the impact, showing the effect of what you guys are doing. So the way it works, you can link children or yourself to a church. So they've given me the details for this church. So we've got 10 girls and 2 boys from this church being sponsored. Now in discussion, we reckon maybe 1 or 2 of these, or however many, are people who perhaps were here and have left. So we're not quite sure quite what the right number is, but this church as a whole, the impact of this church is what we're looking at here. So 10 girls, 2 boys, mostly in secondary age there. And we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about real people. These little girls and boys who some of you might think, oh yeah, that one on the left is the one that I sponsor. They are real people, real lives being changed. In terms of countries, 6 countries are supported here. 7 of the children are from Sri Lanka, and that's really great. There was I think, particular interest in Sri Lanka, so lots of the children are sponsored in Sri Lanka and other countries as well. So with Sri Lanka, off the southeast coast of India, the pearl of the Indian Ocean. It sounds a really lovely place. It's got lush forests, it's got mountains, grow lots of tea that we drink. So that's really great. But also they have heavy monsoons, they have cyclones. Many people live in extreme poverty. So there are difficulties there, are problems there. Compassion has been working there since about 2010, and over 15,000 children in Sri Lanka are sponsored, are supported, so that's really great. And the way it works is that there are 80 partner organizations, typically a church. The church in a particular area will run the project and will have maybe a couple of hundred children come along to it, and Compassion supports them and helps them in doing that. So it's very much a church-based thing. Okay, could we have the first video? This is a video narrated by a little girl in Sri Lanka. It's an update that Compassion have prepared. So for those who sponsor in Sri Lanka, this is for you.
வணக்கம், எனது பெயர் கிருஷாலி. இலங்கையிலிருந்து வாழ்த்துக்கள். எனக்கு 8 வயது. இலங்கையில் மேற்கு பகுதியில் காணப்படும் கம்பஷன் திட்டங்களில் ஒன்றில் நான் இருக்கிறேன். இலங்கையில் பல அழகான இடங்கள் இருக்கிறது. ஆனால் எனக்கு மிகவும் பிடித்த இடம் அழகான கடற்கரை ஆகும். இலங்கை மக்கள் அனைவருடனும் நட்புடன் பழகுவார்கள். எனக்கு மிகவும் பிடித்த உணவு சோறு மற்றும் மீன் கறி. ஒரு சின்ன படுக்கை அறை கொண்ட வாடகை வீட்டில் எனது அம்மா, அப்பா, அக்கா மற்றும் தம்பியுடன் இருக்கிறேன். எனது அப்பா முச்சக்கர வண்டி ஓட்டுகிறார். எனது அம்மா வீட்டில் தைக்குகிறார். கம்பஷன் மூலமாக எனது அம்மா ஒரு தையல் மிஷின் பெற்றுக்கொண்டார். அதனால் வீட்டு வருமானம் ஈட்ட முடிகிறது. இந்த கம்பஷன் திட்டத்திற்கு வர மிகவும் விருப்பம். காரணம், இங்கு பாடல் பாடலாம், நண்பருடன் விளையாடலாம். இங்கு கற்றுக்கொள்வதை மற்றவருடைய அன்பை பகிர்ந்து கொள்ளவும் முடியும். கம்பேஷன் பல ஆண்டுகளாக என்னையும் என் குடும்பத்தையும் ஆதரித்துள்ளது. இந்த திட்டத்தில் உள்ளதை குறித்து நான் மிக நன்றியுள்ளவளாக இருக்கிறேன். இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியில் பெற்ற ஆசீர்வாதத்தை ஒருபோதும் மறக்க வேண்டாம் என்று என் அம்மா கூறுவார். உங்கள் ஆதரவுக்கும் அன்புக்கும் நன்றி. நாங்களும் உங்களை நேசிக்கின்றோம்.
Thanks. I love that, and the smiley faces. We got a Sri Lankan couple who live just down the road from us, and they are so, I don't know if all Sri Lankans are friendly, but they are just beaming and so on. And it's great that there's so much thanks there for what we are doing for these children. So thank you. Now then, the way it works, you're sponsoring a child, and there's a relationship built up. We'll get this sorted in a minute. And one of the things that you can do is write letters to the child, and the child writes letters back to you. So here we go. So over the last 12 months, the children have written 66 letters. That's about 5.5 letters per child over to here, which is absolutely brilliant. And they might not be long letters, but they'll tell you, hang on, they'll tell you a bit about their life and so on. I'll keep going and we'll just see. And you get the chance to write letters back as well. And you've done, 2.5 letters per child or whatever. They absolutely love to get letters. So if I can encourage you, if you are a sponsor, to write a letter, and you can do it the traditional way. They send a form and you write it in, and then it gets sent off and someone translates it into Swahili or whatever language it is. Or you can do it in a really high-tech way called an app or online. And I just got my phone out because I just want to... Audrey and I have been away, and she doesn't even know this. In the car, driving, but she was driving on 4 days ago, I wrote a letter to Susanna here. It's coming up to her birthday, and I just thought, I'll say happy birthday and I'll chat about whatever I was chatting about, one of my boys, because it's his birthday soon as well. And that was the second. I sent it off from my phone, heading down the motorway or whatever we were. It's been checked and translated and sent for translation the same day. Translation is done 2 days ago, printed, ready for delivery. That letter that I sent from the M1 or something is now in Tanzania, all ready for her. So, can I highly recommend using the app or doing it online? Because it just goes straight there. And if you'd not said that, I was literally about to say that, because I sent a couple of photographs to her, one of me and Audrey, I think it was, and one of me and my son, whose birthday it is tomorrow. So yeah, you can do that. So that is actually dead easy to do. And they don't have to be long letters, just little chatty kind of stuff about what's going on in life or whatever. So if I can encourage you to do that. If you want to write it, fine. Use an app, do it online. That is great. And we can sort of point you to the app if needs be. So letters are great, and attached photographs. Right, here we go. Finance. The church here has given way over £5,000 in effect to Compassion over the last year. That is brilliant. That's mostly the monthly gifts and the monthly donations, which is £32 a month. But also you see the 6, don't know why I'm pointing there, I should be pointing there, shouldn't I? 6 additional gifts for, say, birthday or Christmas. You can give some money for the child, and what happens there is the local project team and the family decide what's most appropriate to use your money for. So I've given shoes, and I've given clothes, I've given food, I've even given building materials. How often do you give breeze blocks and sheet roofing to somebody for a birthday? We don't do that, but I thought that's great because someone's decided that's what they need. They need a dry roof or whatever. I've even given a goat, which is the best one, I think. That obviously that really blessed the family. So don't worry about what you're giving. They'll sort that out at the far end. So if you can afford even a small gift, I'm hesitating to say this, but it's coming towards Christmas. And so, A, think about writing a Christmas letter, and B, if you want to give a gift, that is really appreciated because they like the children to have gifts for Christmas. Okay, so thank you for that £5,347. That's brilliant. Then this is looking at other impacts since the church has been partnering with Compassion. So longer term, approaching 11,000 hot, nutritious meals. That is brilliant for those kids. Usually when they're in the, not meals, I got them wrong around, 11,000 hours in the project. They go to the project typically on a Saturday. They get education. They learn about Jesus. They get to play with their friends and so on. They get healthcare, medical checkups, whatever it is. They get vocational training. They've had 11,000 hours of that. Then we've got approaching 4,000 hot meals, which is really great. 60 medical checkups, like we're saying. And they also give Bibles, sort of age-appropriate Bibles, which is why the number is more than the children, because they probably gave a young child's Bible, and then they give an older one. Now we're going to go for another video. This is of a girl, a young lady now called Hilda in Peru, who has been through the system. I just think this is a great story to just see the impact of her life.
My name is Hilda. I am the 8th child in a family of 10 children. We didn't have much money growing up, and we lived in one room. When I was 5 years old, my dad had an accident which left him unable to work. We had no money for food, and I was very scared. I felt like no one cared about me, and I didn't matter. Then everything changed. When I was 9, one of our neighbors told me about Compassion at my local church. I was sponsored through Compassion, and I started to go to the project every week. I was fed there, and I learned how to take care of myself. I learned I was special and that God loved me. My sponsor wrote me letters. They loved me so much even though we never met in person. I am so thankful for my sponsor and everything they did for me. I will remember them until the last day of my life. Without their help, my life would be so different. All I can say is thank you so much for your love, which showed me God's love. Together, the church, Compassion, and my sponsors made me feel valued and gave me a new future.
My name is Hilda. This is my story.
I love that. I mean, there's so much about that I love, but particularly supporting her sister through university. So she's been able to do something as big as that. Hopefully. Can we move on to the next slide? Oh, okay. I've probably put it on about 5 slides or something now, but yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about next is basically what can I do? What can you do? If you feel touched by that, if you feel, yeah, that's something that I want to do, then there's lots of different things you can do. The sort of the starting point is to sponsor a child. And the way that works, we've got some profiles like this on the table over there. Tells you a bit about the child. This is a 14-year-old girl from Sri Lanka called Chanushi. We've got other ones. We've got, I think, from ages 3 to 14, I think. Yeah. So, and you can choose one of those girls, come over the table and have a look. A couple of boys as well. And you can either sponsor this child as an individual, or maybe as a couple, sponsor the child. Or maybe if you've got a connect group, you might say, well, let's do that together. And each contribute a bit, have one of you sort of head that up in terms of the sort of correspondence and the practical side of it. Or maybe a couple of you, if you felt, I can't afford that £32 a month, but I could afford half of it, then a couple of people could do it. So there's different ways of sponsoring the child. It might be you say, I would love to, but I can't. Financially, I can't. And I absolutely get that, because it is a lot of money. But what you can do is you could be someone who writes to the child and prays for the child, because there are people who say, I don't know, rich businessmen or whatever, who put a lot of money in and sponsor a lot of children, but they haven't got time to pray for and write to each of the children. So actually they're looking for people who would be supporters in the sense of praying for and writing to children. So that's maybe something you could think about doing. If you are already sponsoring a child, then that is just so great, and I just appreciate you doing that, and just want to encourage you to keep on writing to them, to keep on praying for them, that sort of thing. Perhaps you could volunteer for Compassion. I've said a bit about what sort of things I do. There's plenty of opportunities for volunteering if you wanted to do that. And then another thing, sometimes, maybe finances or whatever at the moment, we're not feeling we can commit, but perhaps in your will you could leave some money for them. And I've got a booklet about that. If that was something you thought, well, I can do that, but I can't do some of the other things. So in terms of what sponsoring is about, you choose a child, like I've said from the profiles here. If you particularly thought, I really want to sponsor a child who's in, let's just say, Peru or Bolivia or somewhere like that, because God's put that country on your heart, then there's ways we can sort of get a child from a specific country, if that's what you wanted to do. Older children, if you thought, well, actually, I just want to sponsor a child for a few more years, perhaps if an existing sponsor hasn't been able to carry on for some reason, you could sponsor a child who's maybe 15, 18, something like that, just for a few years. So the monthly donation is £32, which I appreciate these days is a lot of money. You can also look at it as it's £1 a week, £1 a day, and doesn't feel quite so much money. But that's hopefully something you might be able to do. But if you can't, that's fine. Birthday and Christmas gifts, totally optional. So you can do that or not, and the amount is absolutely up to you. We talked about sending and receiving letters. You can pray. Compassion produce lots of information where you can pray for their work, pray for projects, etc. I've got a card here, got a QR code on the back. if you want to take one of these and find out more, you can do that. Get the app. I just told you about the letter that I'd sent, but actually on here as well, I can just find out about Susanna and her project and what she's doing and that sort of thing. It's really quick to do that. If you do sponsor a child, link it to the church. We had all of those statistics. It's just really good to see what the church does, and just take the chance to chat to Audrey, chat to myself at the table afterwards. So hopefully that will show you that we can be part of giving a hope and a future to other people. So thank you.